Breaking Celtics, close to reuniting with former Defensive Player of the Year candidate? Speak up, Green Nation. If you are a Celtics fan and are tired of seeing the team suffer defensively in big games, this video is for you. There's a buzz going around that Boston could reunite with a former candidate for Best Defender of the Year. And today, I'm going to show you who this guy is, why he can solve exactly our pain in defense, and how he would fit into this squad that's looking for another title. So stay with me until the end, because after today, you won't look at this rumor the same way. Before we jump into this possible return, quickly, if you are passionate about the Celtics, behind the scenes of the NBA, and don't like hearing about things late, subscribe to the channel now, because here you are, always one step ahead. Enjoy and leave a like. This shows YouTube that you enjoy this type of content and helps me bring more rumors, analyses, and possible exchanges like this. Activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Imagine this negotiation progressing and you not knowing. With that done, let's continue, because now I'm going to reveal who this former candidate for Best Defender of the Year is and explain why he can change the level of the Celtics defense. Let's imagine together the scenario in Boston right now. The Celtics enter the season, and when you look at the table, you see a number that isn't scary, but isn't exciting either. 11 wins, 9 losses, 8th place in the Eastern Conference. For any average franchise, this could be classified as an acceptable start. But we're talking about Boston. Here, the rule is different. It's not enough to be competitive. It's not enough to be in the fight. The feeling is that the team should be dominating, commanding respect, building a top conference campaign. And all of this happens in a strange context. The team is going through something that many people call a year of transition. Important absences, injuries at key moments, changes in the squad, constant adjustments in the rotation. It's as if the team is constantly trying to find itself, reorganize itself, adapt to a reality in which all the pieces are not always available. You watch a few games and think, okay, I can see the potential. In others, that famous question comes back to mind. Something is missing, but what exactly? One of the answers inevitably looks at the bottle. Boston has survived with a kind of committee of great players, each contributing in their own way. On some nights, the plan works, the defense closes, the rebound comes, the matchups are well matched. In others, it is clear that there is a lack of a presence that really changes the level of rim protection, someone that makes the opponent think twice before attacking the basket. And it is precisely at this sensitive point that a rumor that shakes any Celtics fan emerges, the situation of Robert Williams III in Portland. When information began to circulate that the Portland Trail Blazers would be more open to trading Robert Williams this season than they were last year, many people stopped to pay attention. It's not just a random name on the market. He is a player who left a strong mark in Boston, especially for what he did defensively. Add to this the detail that his contract expires at the end of the season, and the question appears almost alone. Would it make sense to imagine a reunion between Robert Williams and the Celtics? Before anything else, it is important to understand where he is in his career. The big question has always been the same. Can he stay healthy? After leaving Boston, Williams' initial stint in Portland was marked by frustration, injuries in sequence, difficulties in amending consecutive games, limited minutes, loss of rhythm. Adding 2 seasons, there were only 26 matches. For an athlete who depends so much on physical explosiveness, jumping time, and the ability to react quickly to plays, this weighs heavily. The difference now is that for the first time since leaving the Celtics, he has managed to build a streak, appeared in 12 of the Blazers' last 14 games, consistently participating in the rotation. He's not the Robert Williams of his heyday, who put his name in the conversation for All-Defensive Team and as a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year, but some traits remain clear to anyone who watches. His defensive reading remains sharp, his contest time remains special, his mobility is still out of character for someone in his position. And more than any data, there is one determining fact. He is on the court. For a player with his track record, that's huge. When we talk about Robert Williams, we're not just talking about cold numbers. We are talking about impact. When he is physically well, he offers a package of skills that fits almost perfectly with a squad that already has high-level creators and scorers on the perimeter. The first feature that catches your eye is rim protection. It's not just the exuberant stumps that make the highlight of the round, but the number of pitches he alters. How many infiltrations end in improvised shots? How many layups turn into desperate passes? How many players give up attacking the basket when they realize it's waiting below? Furthermore, he is a big who is not limited to being a static finisher. When he receives the ball after a pick and roll, he can see the court, make the right pass, activate a free teammate on the perimeter, find a cut behind the defense. In attack, he is a constant threat in aerial jumps, which pulls the marker close to the rim and opens up space for shooters. On defense, he has the versatility to switch in some pick-and-roll situations, hold out for a few seconds guarding shorter players, and even so, recover position and compete in the paint. Now, place this profile within the Celtics' current reality. The team has managed with Neemias Queta, Luka Garza, Xavier Tillman, Chris Boucher, and other names who, at certain times, provide a good service. Some bring energy, others bring rebound, others offer shooting or physicality to fight with heavier centers. But none of them quite replicate the impact that Robert Williams had when he was at his best. He didn't just complete the defense, he redefined how the opponent attacked. That's why this rumor of a possible departure from Portland affects those who look closely at the Celtics so much. It is not just a market opportunity, it's a chance, albeit distant, to revive an element that was part of the team's recent identity. The feeling that any layup against Boston needed to be deserved, never free. On the other hand, there is no point getting excited about the name and ignoring the financial and structural context. The NBA is not a video game where you press a button and the switch happens. Robert Williams is on an expiring contract, making close to $13.3 million. For Boston to be able to acquire him via trade, they would have to put together a package that equals this salary range, which means, in practice, involving someone who currently plays a real role in the rotation. When the pieces are placed on the table, the possible scenarios begin to encounter resistance on both sides. For the Blazers, it doesn't make sense to give up younger or promising assets just to absorb contracts that don't help their rebuild. For the Celtics, moving an important player for someone with a history of injuries and an expiring contract is a big gamble. In theory, some paths go through names like Sam Hauser or more complex constructions involving other players. But when you take the draft off the paper and bring it to reality, the feeling is that little really pleases those who decide on each side. It is no coincidence, therefore, that the exchange route seems unlikely when the situation is taken calmly. It is not a question of the player wanting or not wanting, but rather of fitting together all the factors in a logical way. It is precisely there that other possibilities begin to gain strength. One of them is the buyout. If Portland reaches a point in the season where it can't find a trade offer it deems fair, it could simply opt for a release deal, allowing Robert Williams to seek a new destination while the franchise makes more room for its young centers. In this context, his market value would fit into categories such as the mid-level non-contributor exception, and Boston, which is no longer held back by the second salary penalty range, would return strongly to the conversation. Even if the buyout doesn't materialize, there is free agency in the summer, and then the story changes completely. Regardless of what happens between now and then, the Celtics will have to look at their tank with a critical eye at the end of the season. The age of some players, the injury history of others, what the team lacked in terms of rim protection in decisive moments. All of this enters the internal debate. In this scenario, thinking about Robert Williams stops being a fantasy and becomes at least a serious hypothesis. He knows the system, understands the playing style of the teammates who remained. You know what it's like to deal with the pressure, the fans, the daily demands in Boston. He has shown more than once that he can unbalance the defensive side when he is physically well. It is clear that no one can expect a perfect version, as if no time had passed. There is accumulated wear and tear, the body has already been tested a lot, and it would be irresponsible to project 82 games plus playoffs at a very high level. But maybe he doesn't even need that. Perhaps what the Celtics need most is a player capable of delivering 20 to 25 minutes of solid rim protection, night after night, with spikes and impact in big games, something that was clearly missing in the postseason of the recent. There is also an emotional side to this story, which cannot be ignored. For the fan, Robert Williams represents more than an efficient defender. It symbolizes a period when Boston's defensive identity was clear, almost palpable. With every block he made, with every aerial bridge that blew up the gym, there was a feeling that this was the face of the Celtics. When he left, there was a certain flavor of an unfinished story. It was not an end to the cycle that allowed time to be digested calmly. It seemed more like a separation forced by circumstances. Therefore, talking about a possible meeting affects effective memories. At the same time, demanding that it come back and automatically be the same as before is unfair. The ideal scenario involves a middle ground, recognizing him for what he can still be, respecting the limits imposed by recent years, without transforming this return, if it happens, into an illusion that all the cast's problems would be resolved at once. The interesting thing is to see how everything fits into a larger narrative. On the one hand, a team that seeks to rediscover its best defensive version and at the same time maintain a modern and dynamic attack. On the other, a player who needs to prove, once again, that he can stay healthy, that he is still capable of being a factor on a team that thinks big. The connection between these two stories is almost natural, and that's why, when talking about possible destinations, if the relationship with Portland comes to an end, Boston appears practically at the top of the list of logical possibilities. None of this, however, means that the meeting will happen. The NBA is dynamic, other teams can enter the dispute, new injuries can change priorities, a good performance in Portland can completely change the scenario. But, analyzing the team today, it is difficult not to see the Celtics as one of the most coherent options, both from a technical and emotional point of view. Meanwhile, Boston continues to try to turn this 11-9 start to the season, full of adjustments and uncertainty, into something bigger. The team works to find consistency, define rotations, deal with absences, and build a clear identity. And for those who follow all this closely, there is the feeling that stories like Robert Williams are those that deserve to be observed carefully, not because they're guarantees, but because they carry exactly the kind of potential that from time to time changes the course of a franchise. If his time in Portland is truly coming to an end, it won't be surprising to see Boston's name come up heavily in the conversation. The fit is familiar, the need is evident, and the moment may coincide with a new attempt to open a real title window. Sometimes the league takes turns and ends up bringing players back to the places where they played their best basketball. And if this opportunity arises again, you can be sure, in Boston, they will be ready to at least listen to the idea. So, in the end, it all comes down to this. Either the Celtics face decisions that could change the direction of the franchise head-on, or they run the risk of seeing another title window pass them by without taking advantage. If Robert Williams is really put back on that board, we are not just talking about a name, but a concrete chance to rescue a defensive identity that has already placed Boston among the most feared teams in the league. It's the kind of move that not only adjusts the roster, but also sends a clear message to the rest of the NBA. Boston is still playing to be champion, not just to compete. And if this Robert Williams soap opera gains new chapters, you know that I will be here to unravel every detail, analyze every rumor, every manager's speech, every rotation movement that could make room for this possible return. So, if you want to continue on this journey, understanding not only what happens, but why it happens, the next step is simple. When you finish this video, scroll down here and go straight to the Celtics Analysis playlist in the pinned comment. There, I delve into everything. Behind-the-scenes movements, tactical adjustments, player performance, exchange scenario, and what each decision means for the future of the franchise. If you're really passionate about the Celtics and want to follow this story with more context, more details, and more long-term vision, this playlist is your next destination. Click on the Celtics Analysis playlist in the pinned comment and stay with me because the season is just beginning. And if the league decides it's time for a reunion between Boston and Robert Williams, you'll want to be on the right side of that story.